When the ruthless Centauri Armada entered our solar system, they didn't offer a truce. They instantly vaporized a human space station, killing 12,000 innocent civilians just to show off their invincible dark matter shields. The alien admiral broadcasted a message to Earth, demanding total surrender within 45 seconds. He thought we were just quiet space miners who would break under pressure. He didn't realize that deep inside Earth's moon, humanity had spent 30 years building a weapon that would rewrite the laws of galactic warfare. And 45 seconds was exactly how long it took to load it. The void of the Sol system had always been a remarkably quiet neighborhood. For over 2 centuries, humanity had kept strictly to itself, engineering their small corner of the universe with a stubborn, intensely practical focus. They didn't construct grand galactic monuments, they didn't participate in the multi-species trade councils of the Inner Orion Arm, and they certainly didn't possess the flashy, glowing plasma arrays or antimatter fleets of the older, well-established star empires. To the rest of the galaxy, the United Terran Coalition was viewed as little more than a quiet, low-tech race of blue-collar miners, haulers, and planetary engineers. They were the background noise of the sector. But in the high-altitude, vaulted war rooms of the Centauri Ascendancy, humanity was viewed through a much simpler lens. They were an easy target. The Centauri were a Tier 1 conquering empire, a proud race of avian reptilian expansionists who prided themselves on their magnificent, gold-plated dreadnoughts and their cutting-edge dark matter shield matrices. Their military doctrine was absolute, repeated across a dozen conquered sectors. Show up in overwhelming numbers, immediately vaporize the local orbital defense grid with their primary plasma lances, and demand immediate, unconditional surrender before the native population could even process the attack. They had successfully subjugated 42 worlds using this exact, unyielding template. To them, conquest was not a risk, it was an exact science. The Terran sector is ours for the taking, High Admiral Vorak boasted, his dual mandibles clicking with predatory arrogance as he stood before his war council on the pristine bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Starcutter. Their defensive warships are laughably small, primitive corvettes. Their outer colony on Mars is completely unprotected from high-altitude bombardment. We will strike them hard, shatter their communication arrays, and they will be begging to serve the Ascendancy within 48 hours. Primate empires always break when they realize they are outmatched. The Centauri fleet, a terrifying armada of 80 advanced, gold-plated warships, each stretching miles long, dropped out of hyperspace just past the frozen orbit of Pluto. They didn't bother offering diplomatic terms. They didn't issue standard warnings or request identification logs. The forward cruisers instantly unleashed their primary plasma lances against the human mining colony on the asteroid Vesta, turning a thriving industrial outpost of 12,000 civilian workers into an expanding, silent cloud of molten slag, shattered steel, and microscopic dust. It was a brutal, completely unprovoked demonstration of imperial power meant to shock the human command structure into instant, paralyzed submission. Broadcast our terms to the human homeworld, Vorak commanded, a smug, cold grin spreading across his scaled face as he watched the tactical display update. Tell them to disable their planetary power grids and prepare their regional leaders for total abdication. Let them look at the empty space where Vesta used to be and realize the absolute futility of resistance. Deep within the hollowed-out interior of Earth's moon, inside the heavily fortified, shock-absorbed bunker of Lunar Command, the atmosphere was completely static. There was no screaming, no hysterical panic, and no frantic rushing of officers spilling their drinks or shouting orders. The human military commanders didn't break down into tears over the loss of Vesta, nor did they panic over the size of the incoming armada. Instead, a cold, suffocating, and collective fury settled over the room, a primal, ancestral survival switch that hadn't been flipped since the brutal global world wars of ancient Earth. It was the quiet stillness of a cornered apex predator realizing that diplomacy was no longer an option. General Arthur Vance stood before the primary tactical display, his thick, scarred hands resting heavily on the edge of the steel console. He was a graying veteran of the old asteroid border skirmishes, his face lined with the deep, permanent stress of long-term command. On the main holographic screen, The red icon representing Vesta blinked once, twice, and then completely vanished from the network. 12,000 human lives, erased in a fraction of a second. They didn't even send a diplomat, Vance said, his voice dropping into a hollow, deadly whisper that seemed to drop the temperature of the entire room by 10 degrees. They didn't ask questions. They just started shooting. Sir, a young sensor technician reported, her voice trembling slightly under the weight of the data but holding her military discipline firmly. The Centauri Armada is accelerating past the asteroid belt. They are burning hot toward Earth's orbital perimeter. They have activated their primary dark matter shields. Their weapon systems are charging at maximum capacity. Vance slowly looked up, his dead, cold eyes fixing on a secondary, heavily classified monitor at the far end of the room. The screen displayed a single, massive structural layout that spanned from the north pole of the moon all the way down to its southern craters. It was an engineering project that had quietly consumed 60% of Earth's industrial GDP for over 30 years. A project the general public and foreign spies believed was merely a heavy element mass driver meant for long-distance interstellar shipping. They thought we were just miners, Vance said softly, his hand moving toward a large, covered red switch on his console. He flipped the safety cover open with a definitive click. They forgot what miners do best. We move rock. And we move it very, very fast. Activate Project Archangel. Wake up the Railgun. Deep beneath the gray, dusty surface of the moon, miles of superconducting magnetic coils began to thrum with an immense, terrifying amount of electrical energy. The massive, buried fusion reactors at the moon's core roared to life, channeling hundreds of gigawatts of raw, unfiltered power into a single, 3,000-mile-long barrel drilled straight through the solid lunar crust. Inside the automated loading bay of the barrel sat the projectile. It wasn't a sophisticated missile. It didn't have an onboard guidance system, an antimatter payload, a smart targeting computer, or a cloaking device. It was a simple, solid, 20-ton slug of hyperdense tungsten carbide, wrapped snugly in a magnetic sabot. It was a 3-word sentence written in the ancient, unyielding language of physics: mass, velocity, and impact. Aboard the Star Cutter, High Admiral Vorak was growing increasingly impatient. Have the primates responded to our surrender ultimatum yet? Their 45 seconds are almost up. No, Admiral, the communications officer replied, staring at his array of monitors with a deeply confused expression. Their global datanets are completely silent. They aren't mobilizing their fleet. They aren't even scrambling their atmospheric fighters or orbital platforms. It's like they aren't even trying to defend themselves. Perhaps they have accepted their fate. Arrogant primitives, Vorak sneered, raising his hand to order his forward cruisers to begin target acquisition on Earth's major population centers. They think their silence will save them. Wipe out their satellite array and let them watch their cities burn. Before Vorak could finish his command, the primary tactical sensors on the bridge didn't just flash, they completely short-circuited. A piercing, high-pitched alarm wailed through the ship's audio system as the main computer struggled to calculate an anomaly that violated all standard rules of galactic engagement. Admiral, the sensor technician screamed, his primary antennae flaring in absolute terror as he slammed his hands onto his failing console. Massive energy spike detected on the human moon. The power output it's breaking our sensors. Something is coming toward us at impossible speeds. What is it? A plasma bolt? A high-yield antimatter missile? Vorak demanded, leaning wildly over the console, his eyes darting across the flickering tactical map. No, sir. It's solid. It has no energy signature, no engine heat. It's moving at... The technician never finished his sentence. From the silent surface of the moon, a flash of white-hot kinetic energy erupted as the 20-ton tungsten slug left the 3,000-mile barrel. The projectile was traveling at exactly 4% of the speed of light, a velocity so incredibly violent that it didn't just travel through the vacuum of space. It compressed the local gravitational fields around it, dragging a wake of silent, distorted vacuum in its path. The Centauri Vanguard cruiser, the Aegis 7, a massive, 2-mile-long armored dreadnought equipped with the most advanced dark matter shields the Empire could by stood directly in the firing line. The tungsten slug hit the shield. The dark matter energy screen didn't deflect it. It didn't absorb it. It didn't dissipate the impact. The pure, unadulterated kinetic energy of 20 tons of solid metal moving at 11,000 kilometers per second instantly overwhelmed the shield's crystalline generators, causing them to explode in a catastrophic burst of secondary electrical fires. The slug punched through the dark matter shield like a steel spike through a fragile spiderweb. It hit the bow of the dreadnought, traveling through 2 miles of reinforced starship armor, heavy structural bulkheads, crew quarters, ammunition bays, and primary reactor cores in less than a millisecond. It entered the front of the ship and exited the rear without even slowing down. The sheer kinetic shockwave didn't just punch a clean hole, it turned the entire internal structure of the Aegis 7 into soup. The extreme friction and pressure instantly liquefied the metal hull from the inside out, causing the massive ship to implode inward on itself before expanding into a silent, blinding fireball of twisted scrap and vaporized armor. One of the greatest warships in the galaxy was completely erased from existence in a fraction of a heartbeat. The bridge of the Star Cutter fell into a horrific, catatonic silence. The remaining 79 Centauri captains watched their primary view screens, their minds completely failing to process what they had just witnessed. What weapon was that? Vorak whispered, his hands trembling violently against his command console, his smug arrogance completely shattering into a cold, paralyzing fear. Did they detonate a localized singularity? Where is the energy trail? Where is the plasma signature? There is no energy trail, Admiral, the helmsman wept, his eyes wide with madness as he stared at the expanding debris cloud. It was just a rock. They just shot a piece of solid iron at us. Sir, another dreadnought just vanished from the network. The projectile passed clean through the Aegis 7 and hit the Vanguard 3 right behind it. The kinetic slug, still carrying an immense amount of its original momentum, had indeed penetrated the second warship in the line, tearing its entire bridge away and leaving it a drifting, dead hull in the void. 2 premier Imperial dreadnoughts destroyed by a single shot from a weapon that didn't even use gunpowder. Before Vorak could issue a command to retreat, the primary comm screen on his console flickered to life, overriding the Imperial encryption protocols with a brutal, high-gain signal. It didn't show a desperate human politician begging for a ceasefire or a terrified general pleading for his planet. It showed General Arthur Vance, sitting calmly in the lunar command bunker, a half-empty mug of black coffee resting on his steel desk. His face was entirely expressionless, his eyes hard and unyielding as he looked directly through the transmission at the terrified alien admiral. Centauri Armada. Vance's voice echoed through the bridge of the flagship, carrying a flat, terrifying weight that seemed to fill every corner of the room. 2 minutes ago, you attacked our civilian workers on Vesta without cause. You brought a war to our doorstep because you thought we were soft. You thought we were weak because we chose to build mines and cargo transport systems instead of battleships. Vance slowly reached down, his fingers lightly resting on the secondary cycle button of the railgun controls. But you see, an automated railgun doesn't care about your dark matter shields, Vance continued, his voice dropping into a deadly, rhythmic rasp. It doesn't care about your imperial titles, your galactic standing, or your golden armor. It only understands mass and acceleration. Our automated loader takes exactly 45 seconds to chamber the next slug. And we have 4 million tons of tungsten left in the lunar mines. Vance leaned closer to the camera, his gaze piercing through the void of space. Turn your ships around. Or we will spend the rest of the afternoon turning your glorious empire into a celestial shooting gallery. The transmission abruptly cut to static, leaving the Centauri bridge in total darkness for a brief second before the backup power kicked in. High Admiral Vorak didn't look at his war council. He didn't consult his tactical algorithms, and he didn't check his defensive formations. He looked out of the primary viewport at the distant, silent gray sphere of the human moon, knowing that deep within that rock, a giant, automated magnetic monster was already tracking his flagship's specific coordinate vector. All ships! Vorak screamed, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic as he slammed his hand onto the fleet-wide broadcast button. Engage hyperspace drives immediately. Override all safety protocols. Abort the invasion. Turn us around. Now. The proud, supposedly invincible Centauri Armada didn't execute a tactical retreat. They scattered like frightened insects exposed to a sudden light. Ships collided with each other in their desperate, frantic haste to align their warp coordinates, their elegant, gold-plated hulls scraping together and shearing off sensor arrays as they fled backward into the dark void, desperate to escape the terrifying, invisible reach of human physics. Within 3 short minutes, the Sol system was entirely empty of enemy life. The invaders were completely gone, leaving behind only the drifting, glowing, melted wreckage of the 2 dreadnoughts that had dared to test humanity's patience. Back in the lunar command bunker, the tactical screens smoothly returned to their normal, peaceful blue. The flashing red warning icons had entirely disappeared from the radar. The young sensor technician let out a long, shaky breath, leaning back in her chair as she wiped cold sweat from her forehead. "Sir, the enemy fleet has completely cleared the sector. They are in full warp retreat toward the outer rim. We're clear." General Vance didn't cheer. He didn't pump his fist in victory, and he didn't order a celebration. He slowly stood up from his console, walked over to the reinforced viewing window, and looked out at the beautiful, fragile blue marble of Earth hanging peacefully in the black sky. He took a slow, quiet sip from his coffee mug, his face returning to the gentle, tired expression of a man who vastly preferred peace over destruction. "Good," Vance said softly, turning back to his crew with a nod. "Tell the automated engineering teams to power down the magnetic coils and return the system to the standard shipping schedules. We have a lot of iron to move today." From that day forward, the galactic community maintained a very strict, very polite, and very terrified distance from the Sol system. The stories of the lunar hammer spread across 100 star systems, a legendary, cautionary warning to any young, aggressive empire that thought about expanding into human territory. They learned that humanity was indeed a species of peaceful miners and quiet engineers who preferred to mind their own business. But they also learned a fundamental truth that would keep the peace for a millennium. Never attack a species that can weaponize the very ground beneath their feet, because when humanity responds, the entire universe stops to listen to the thunder.